for today is kind of evaluating some of the assumptions that are driving the work that we're all trying to do in this space. And I'd say for the last decade, roughly, what most of us, whether from a researcher's perspective, from my case, or for some of you practitioners who are working in the civic tech space, has been trying desperately in many cases with a lot of setbacks and many, many barriers to drive the elusive digital government transformation. And I think we can all agree on what that object is. It's creating more open, less siloed government institutions, ones where the needs of users are placed at the center of government work, thinking about using data more strategically, more entrepreneurialism, fewer approvals, more agile processes. And this kind of orthodoxy is pretty well accepted and has been pretty well accepted and unquestioned as we've moved through the past 10 years of trying to push these changes. Why? So we've rationalized this, most of us, myself included, on the grounds that digital transformation is absolutely key to meeting the expectations of citizens living in a world of Amazons, Ubers, and Googles. You'll find this phrase kind of littered throughout government policy documents, civic tech movement, manifestos, academic research, which is, if government doesn't produce services that rival those of the private sector in a digital age, citizens will lose trust in government. We've all said that actually a couple of times tonight even, and that's how we justify this movement, that this is really about kind of core faith in the democratic institution of government. Now, I think the fascinating thing is that we're actually starting to see that digital transformation that we've all been pushing for to happen at scale. So in Canada, we're seeing it at the federal level through some of the initiatives being run by CDS, through a lot of the work coming out of the CIO's office and pushing for, say, tell us once service models, government as a platform, data sharing between different orders of government. This stuff is happening. In Ontario, we see it in the new Faster, Better Services Act and in the creation of the Chief Digital and Data Officer position that the part of the 18F diaspora is being led by the wonderful Hillary Hartley. At the city level, we see it in the expansion, sometimes invisible, but the massive expansion of smart city initiatives. And then we also see it in kind of the private sector and their increasing involvement in the tech sector in delivering government services, for example. What we're learning is that actually citizens don't want a lot of this stuff. There's massive pushback and huge stakes at play when digital transformation actually starts to happen. And it's not so clear that we've defined citizen expectations correctly. So we see it in things like the Canadian population's pushback against StatsCan's attempts to pull data from financial institutions, which was totally legal and happens in many countries, and could inform more data-driven policymaking as per the dreams of digital government evangelists. However, Canadians were like, whoa, why are you taking my data? Not cool with that. Or you also see it most obviously in Toronto and the massive pushback against the Smart City initiative that Google's sister company is attempting to push. So where does this leave us? I think we actually have to reset the conversation in many ways, and that's something that I'm trying to do in my research now, which is to say that we don't actually know very much about what citizens want from their digital governments. Ironically, as we've been talking so much about user research and putting users at the center of government, we've taken a fairly narrow view of the citizenry as a set of users who interact with the state at the point of transaction, and they just want their services to look like those of Amazon or be as easy as what they access from Google. But actually, if we get into the values and preferences of citizens, what they're actually looking for from their governments might be quite different from what they look for from the private sector. I also think it's really important to remember that in many citizens' eyes, the tech sector is no longer idolized as some sort of benevolent actor. Where we hear about data leaks daily, people are very concerned about things like drones with tasers and surveillance technologies, for example. So I think echoing a lot of what Lane was saying, I was nodding furiously when you were talking, we have to really stop propagating this idea that citizens want their governments to look like these tech companies, and that if we don't, we're going to lose their faith. Remarkably, I have found there is zero evidence to demonstrate that. I keep asking public servants, do you have survey data on that? Where do we have evidence that Canadians want their government to act and be as whizzy and fast and use data as liberally as some of these tech firms? And I'm always met with blank faces and the, good point, I don't actually have data on that. So what do we do next? One thing that I'm trying to do is I'm working with funding from the federal government to do some experimental survey research with Canadians to get a sense of the conditions under which they're comfortable having their data collected and used by governments. where they want the private sector to play a role in this space and where they definitely do not. And I think the goal ultimately is to say, if we want to launch sustainable and trustworthy digital era governments, we need to secure democratic license in the first place. So we need to, that might actually mean slowing down. It might mean governments don't do a lot of the things we've been pushing for with digital transformation, and that it is precisely that which satisfies citizens' expectations. Thank you.